Welcome to 99 Yards, American football for UK fans. I am your host, Bhandari, and this week I am joined by Duncan Terry, Shona Duthie, Ryan Conway, as well as very special guest, Nat Coombs. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, good. Nat, it's great to have you along on our pod. How's your season going? Did you enjoy the international series?
It's good to be here, Liz. Thanks very much for having me. I can't really think straight because we're recording this the day after the freight train that was Monday Night Football, which I watched and then had about 7 minutes sleep, like the old days, and then had to get up and write my column for the Times, which I'm amazed I filed in any kind of coherent form whatsoever. So I am in good spirits, but a bit tired. And yeah, no, I love the international series. Once again, it delivered. Well, the first game was a blowout, obviously, but the other two were compelling, if not vintage, weren't they?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they were good. I didn't like the first game, personally. I like the blowout.
You like the blowout? Are you a Seahawks fan?
I am, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Actually, there's 3 Seahawks fans on this call right now.
What is going on? I've been ambushed. Okay, well that was a big. I mean, to be fair, I was at the Gruden presser on the Friday. So on the Friday, it was such a stark contrast, right? So I was with the Seahawks earlier in the day, and I did an interview with Tyler Lockett, who is a thoroughly splendid chap, and they were just composed and together and organised. At one point, Pete Carroll walked past. Had a look at the interview, and you could just feel his energy from about 50 feet away. It's just this ball of Pete Carroll goodness just rolled on past. And then you contrast that with the Raiders, who decided to start their press conference about 15 minutes early, despite no one being ready for this. So you had this absolutely chaotic scramble where cameramen were trying to set up the poor sound guy who was miking the podium wasn't ready, and Gruden just rolled up and started taking questions. It was just absolutely chaotic. So after that, I could pretty much tell how that game was going to go.
Yeah, I also got to interview Pete Carroll.
Oh, nice.
He didn't understand a word I was saying because I'm Scottish, so it was quite fun. So I had to get the American guy to translate it for me.
Brilliant. But he's, I mean, at the start of the season, and I'd be interested in your perspectives, guys, if you're all Seahawks fans. I thought they were being really underestimated. No one was taking them seriously, and everyone seemed to be talking about the beginning of the end for Carroll. But, I mean, it's gone pretty well, hasn't it, so far?
You've got a real mix of opinions on this pod. I'm very much entrenched in the they haven't actually beaten anyone with a winning record yet. Let's not count our horses. And I don't think you like my negativity, dear Shona.
No, it's too negative, Don. Come on, right? At the start of the season, everyone was saying Seahawks are guaranteed number 1 spot for the draft next year, which I thought was absolutely crazy because we're not the Raiders. And I was right. We're not going to be the number 1 spot next year. And I actually don't mind how we've done. Yeah, maybe we haven't beat anyone with a winning record. We're kind of like in the middle of the road. But for a rebuilding year, I'd rather be in the middle of the road compared to like where the Cardinals and the Raiders are at the moment.
But you almost beat the Rams twice. I mean, you could conceivably have won both of those games.
Yeah, I'm still disappointed about that. The Rams don't exist to me right now.
So in this week's episode, we'll be talking about who is in and who is out of the playoff picture, as well as interview ex-rugby union, now Pittsburgh Steeler, Christian Scotland-Williamson. But first, let's look at this week's Thanksgiving games. Duncan, what do you make of Lions' chances this year?
Well, I grabbed this fixture because I've spent many a Thanksgiving night watching disappointedly as year after year they just capitulated against whoever they were playing. And I really enjoy watching the Lions on Thanksgiving. Calvin Johnson was a massive highlight. But this year, I mean, it's all gone downhill again, hasn't it? They were competing, they were thereabouts, and then they traded Golden Tate, and I really didn't understand that. It was like they were giving up, while they were still a factor. And they've really gone downhill since. They've had some injuries, fair enough, but the O-line looks a mess, and Matthew Stafford is not playing as well as he could. And then you've got the Bears, who they're on the up. They're looking like really competitive in their division, and their young players are really stepping up. Roquan Smith and Anthony Miller are the latest young names. So I actually fear another blowout on Thanksgiving for the Lions.
And Nat, it might be a close race in the NFC East this year. What do you think of the crucial Redskins-Cowboys fixture?
I think the Giants are still going to win it. Having tipped them as my dark horse at the start of the season, I'm clinging on for dear life. I mean, it's a really interesting division, isn't it?
That's one word to describe it.
Yeah.
No one wants to. But I always like those divisions every year that are probably the weakest, but as a result of that, the most compelling, right? So no one wants to win it. I think the Cowboys are probably in the box seat now, aren't they? I mean, like, we were talking about it on my pod on Monday when we recorded that episode about how much of a downgrade it is to Colt McCoy. I think it's quite a big downgrade, but there was a sort of division of opinion there. I guess that's what this revolves on, and whether, you know, McCoy, like all good backups, can be half decent for a small sample size of games, and then it all falls off a cliff. You know, like Ryan Fitzpatrick is the prototype for that, right? So I don't know. I think the Cowboys might win it with a 9-7 record.
Oh, Nat, you've disappointed me, because seeing Jerry Jones happy is not good.
Yeah, that is a really good point. I mean, every bone in my body hopes they don't, but I think they might. And I quite like Amari Cooper as well. I hope it works out for him, seeing as every single person in the world was absolutely laying into that trade, and I think I was in a very vocal minority of maybe it wasn't as bad a deal as it perhaps was suggested. But I don't know. I'd like to see Amari Cooper do. And Zeke Elliott is just so bloody good. He deserves something going on there. So, you know, but Jerry Jones, you're right, is the yang to that yin.
He is indeed.
Yeah.
And Shona, the Saints and Falcons, they're renewing their rivalry. What are we going to get from the Falcons this week?
It's an interesting one, because at the beginning of the season, I would have thought this would be a lot closer in terms of their record than it is. You know, Falcons are now 4-6. And if I remember rightly, Ryan, you'll like this, the last time a team managed to make the playoffs after going 4-6 was the Green Bay Packers in 2016. But Matt Ryan is not Aaron Rodgers. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting one. I see Saints winning. You know, they've just scored over 40 points against a Super Bowl champion, which is the first time that's happened since the NFL began. So yeah, I hope the Falcons defense can turn up, and I hope their offense can turn up. But I can't see past the Saints, you know, just go for it and getting another win under their belt. But yeah, I think Atlanta is just struggling since that Super Bowl, which I know is like taboo to mention anywhere.
Earlier this week, I was lucky to speak to fellow Brit, former rugby union star and current Pittsburgh Steeler, Christian Scotland-Williamson, where we discussed life in the NFL and the opportunity that he's been given to show what he has to offer to the world of American football. Let's hear what he had to say. Now, Christian, you've been on quite the journey. You started off playing rugby union for the Worcester Warriors, and now here you are on the practice squad for the Steelers as tight end. Now, my understanding of the international player pathway is that it identifies athletes from around the world who show potential talent to play NFL at the highest level. Could you perhaps tell me how this opportunity came around for you?
So it's actually an interesting one. So I hadn't really thought about the prospect of playing American football properly. So I was playing rugby in the Premiership for Worcester. I was going into my free agent year. I was playing really well. And I had one big hit that went viral in the UK, and then that had my name mentioned in the right circles. And then from that, even in the locker room, and my brother actually went to college in America to play basketball. After that hit, he had people in America saying, "Oh, you need to try and give American football a go. Like, why haven't you played that?" And obviously, being from the UK, it's not really on your doorstep, so it's quite hard to seek out opportunities to play American football. So then after, I think, 3 weeks of that tackle, some people who were involved with Alex Gray, who obviously is with the Falcons on practice squad, is that first year of that international pathway program, got in touch with me and kind of explained the opportunity, and if I was able to make myself available and wanted to pursue it, if I had the raw tools to actually make a go of it, then it would be worth talking about. So I met up with a few people and decided to quit my job, get out of my contract playing rugby with Worcester. I was fortunate enough that they were very understanding, understood my reasons for pursuing this, because it really is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, especially having never played college football or high school football. It's rare enough to get a shot at the NFL, let alone having never played before. So that's kind of how it came about.
Brilliant. And what are your hopes and aims now that you are on the international player pathway? What's next?
So at the moment, it's about learning as much as possible. So I can't actually play this season. I can't get activated, but I was fortunate enough to play in all 4 preseason games. So it's been a learning experience. Every day I'm learning new things. I'm going up against some great opposition. I'm fortunate enough that being in such a great organisation with such talented players, it means that you upskill very quickly because the guys you're going up against are the very best. So if you can manage to block or make plays against those guys, then you're doing well.
Now let's talk around the switch from rugby union to American football. How have you had to change your physique and fitness to adapt to the demands of American football? And secondly, how different is the game from a mental preparation point of view?
So both are pretty different. I'd say the mental side is the most different. Physically, it's just getting used to a lot more explosive movements. So with rugby, I was used to running, say, 5 to 6 kilometers per game and per practice session. And the training sessions were probably an hour and a half. Whereas over here, training is a bit longer. So practice can last up to 2.5 hours. And you probably cover a similar distance, but it's all maximum intensity sprints. So that did take some getting used to initially because, as you'd imagine, when you're used to kind of longer distance running, which isn't as intense, things like your hamstring, your groin and stuff like that tightens up quite quickly. But that was, I got used to that probably by the end of OTAs and got used to the flow of practice. But the mental side is by far the most challenging. I'd say it's probably 80% mental in terms of the transition, because with rugby, you have a very brief skeleton or overview where you have a few plays because it's such a free-flowing game and there's less room for intervention. You can't really script as much, and it's you have to rely on the athlete making decisions on the field. Whereas with American football, because you can script every single play, it's almost like running intermittent sprints and having a test at the end of every rep, because you have to be able to recall what the play is, where you have to line up your assignment and then go and execute at full speed. And obviously the playbook is so vast, and say if you get to the line and you have to change the call and make an audible, you have to be able to process that within 2 or 3 seconds and then execute at full speed. Whereas with rugby, you kind of take yourself into that dark hole when it gets to 60 to 70 minutes and you kind of hang on and then just rely on your instincts. So it's much more challenging mentally being in the NFL.
And the position that you play is tight end. Is that a position that you chose, or is it more an area that the coaches felt you'd be strongest in?
I think it's an area that uses a lot of my skills. So with rugby, you obviously play both sides of the ball and you have to catch, pass, tackle. So I think the hardest part of playing tight end at the moment is the blocking, because in rugby you don't have to do any of that. There's nothing remotely close to that, where you have to concentrate on your footwork, your hand placement, and exploding off the ball and then being able to kind of overpower your opposite man. So that is still taking some getting used to, and it's a learning curve.
And what does a typical day look like for you? Perhaps you can guide me through your daily routine.
Okay, so if we start from a Monday, so Monday after a game, I'll probably come in to the building around 11 a.m. and I'd have a run and a lift. Then you'd have following meetings for about 2 to 3 hours, and then you'd probably leave the building. So that'd be all of your review from the previous game and trying to get all of that kind of admin out of the way so that when you report back on a Wednesday, you can start game planning for the opposition for the coming week. Then on the Wednesday, it's our heavy pad day, so that's our main work day with most of our installs. So I probably get to the building around 6:45, have a lift until 8, and then I'll be in meetings from 8 until 11:30, then on the field from 12:15 to about 3, and then you'd have meetings after that too. And Thursday looks very much the same except without pads, and then Friday is a fast Friday where you have an early practice where you're on the field at 10:45 for around 2.5 hours still, and then you wouldn't have too many meetings after.
Obviously, you mentioned earlier you signed with a squad earlier this year, and no doubt the coaches are working closely with you to develop you to be the best player that you could be. Have you found a mentor within the team, a player perhaps, that has taken time to teach and mould you as a player?
I wouldn't say it's one player in particular. I'd say I try and learn from everyone. So whether it's even asking a lot of the offensive linemen about blocking techniques, because obviously that's what they do, is their main priority for a living. So I've also got a great tight end room. So I've got Vance McDonald, Jesse James, Xavier Grimble to all learn from. So it's more wherever I need help, I'll just ask the best person. So I'd say it's more trying to just learn from everyone and pick up things as I go.
And when it comes to game day, are the practice squad there on the sidelines?
Yes. So we'll report about 2 hours before kickoff, and we'll be on the sideline with the team during the whole game. So that's a very exciting part.
Yeah, absolutely. And was American football a sport that you were already a fan or following at all before you made the move?
Funny enough, I was actually a Steelers fan.
Oh, that's cool.
Before, yeah. So I'd always been a Steelers fan. If anyone asked me what my team was, I'd always say Steelers. So to actually end up in the building is extremely surreal. So it was one of those where, obviously now with Sky's coverage and Red Zone and things like that, it's much more available. The London games, obviously, you can see a lot more of the NFL presence in Europe and in the UK in particular. But when I was, say, 10, 11, you only really saw playoff games occasionally or the Super Bowl because it was on at such awkward times. And obviously you might have school or things like that. But I'd say in the last 5 years, obviously the attention has just grown exponentially in the UK. So it's made it easier for people to be fans. Absolutely.
And is there a player at all across the league that you aspire to be like? And if so, who is it and why?
That's a tough one. I think because of my body type, I think I'm one of the biggest in my position in the league, so it's quite hard to find that direct comparison. But you always try and just look at different people's styles and try and cherry pick different things that they do well. So obviously, the tight end of the league's Rob Gronkowski, but then if you look at what Vance McDonald's doing in our building, he's running over people the whole time. So if I could try and be a bit more like Vance and then have a solid blocking base, then you'd be doing well.
Well, that was incredible, Christian. It's great to hear your story so far, and I've got to say I'm super excited for your future as well. I genuinely wish you all the best. And thanks again for taking the time to speak with me. And Joe, thanks for helping set it up as well.
Thanks a lot.
I'm sure you'll agree that was interesting stuff. Nat, Ryan, what do you think of the player pathway scheme that has seen players like Christian, Alex Jenkins, Efe Oboda move to the NFL? Christian Wade appears to be the next guy heading over. Could other high-profile players follow suit?
I think it's a really good initiative and idea, especially when we've seen people like discus thrower Lawrence Okoye has tried his hand at the NFL and he's flamed out, just unable to adapt and sort of mutate to the sport so quickly, and not all of it is his fault. And they didn't have this scheme in place when Okoye was trying to make it in the NFL. This makes it, well, it's not easy at all, but it makes it, easier. It gives them a better chance, I think. And to make it more of a global sport, more global representation. I mean, there were 69 athletes representing 30 countries last year, and that's per Football Reference. With them expanding all the time. It's a good thing to have this. I think it is a good thing to have it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's great because talent is nothing without opportunity, as they say. And I've spoken with Christian as well. Alex Gray is another guy out there. He's a sevens player. He's with the Falcons on their practice squad as well. And these guys are really, really focused on the rapid and pretty intense education they're going on. So, and it isn't just physical, but obviously mental as well. But what Alex said that was really interesting was that he's a tight end like Christian, and he was saying that is one of the more complex positions to learn. And would have thought, because you see a lot of basketball players try, move over. So Antonio Gates, maybe the most notable of all. He was a basketball player originally, and then obviously, turned his attention in college to football, and the rest is history, right? And you thought, okay, maybe that's a position then that athletes can transition more quickly. But Alex was saying that given what I've got to be reading and picking up, it's actually a really complex position to learn. So it's so impressive that these guys are doing that and blazing a trail, really. Also, it's worth throwing into this conversation Phoebe Schechter, who I'm sure a lot of your listeners will know all about, but those that don't, is with the Buffalo Bills at the moment on a coaching internship. And Phoebe's a player too, and captained the British ladies team, but also obviously is turning her hand to coaching. And she has been given opportunity and grabbed it with both hands. And she was telling me the rate of learning and the pressure that anybody who hasn't been born into it instinctively and intuitively has got to accelerate is a huge challenge. But the NFL teams, a number of them anyway, are open to it. So I think it's win-win, right? The players, the teams rather, aren't taking a massive gamble. Christian and the guys are a bonus roster spot on the practice squad. So, there's a small financial implication, but, why don't they chance their arm and see if they can develop a player? So when that learning does get up to scratch, are they gonna be a decent player on the roster? And I think a number of them will, and I think we'll only see more players following suit.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think the important thing which Nat just outlined is that the roster spot reserved for these guys coming off that the scheme is it's exclusive to that initiative. It's not part of the practice squad, and that's sort of imperative to get teams to buy in, I think, because you're taking such a big risk, and you don't want to fill up your practice squad with someone who you might not pick it up. So I think the fact that you get one spot for these players is really important. It's a really important sort of bargaining chip for the teams to have as well.
Yeah, that's a really good good point. And I guess we've got to remember the lack of, or the absence of, NFL Europe, right? Which was such people always go on about NFL Europe. Well, it wasn't really successful because it was the B game and fans didn't really. Yeah, and that's probably true in that respect. We are lucky to be born in this generation where we're getting the A game, 3-4 times a season, and it's obviously far superior in that respect. But you talk to any NFL coach or front office guy, and they bemoan the loss of NFL Europe because it was such a brilliant developmental league for coaches as much as players, and Kurt Warner and all those incredible success stories, but a lot of coaches, and you just look at the CVs of the head coaches in the NFL now, cut their teeth in Europe with franchises, and the absence of that is a problem, I think, for the NFL. I wonder whether they'll tackle that in some way, not reinstating NFL Europe, but creating some kind of developmental league that I think is sorely lacking at the moment.
Yeah, I think that will be quite interesting to see if it does go down that route, like you say. I think it's impressive the fact that we get the games here and that we have the development program in the first place. I think it shows that it is serious. We do think about it, and we've got talent to give.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Liz. That I remember the first season I covered NFL as a broadcaster was 2007, which was the first year of the International Series game, of course. And we were out in the States quite a lot that year because we were doing a lot of regular season games from there at the time, and some anyway. And so many of the Americans were and these are guys inside the game, right, were utterly bemused, cynical, just taking the mickey about it all. And you think how far that has come now, where you had, NFL Network's breakfast show here all week. Greg and the Around the NFL boys absolutely loving it. And it's just everybody, well, that's an exaggeration. Most people now are treating it as a standard and as a given. And I think when we start to see that with players going the other way, where it isn't a curiosity and it isn't strange, it's just, he used to play rugby, and now, like these 25 other guys before him, that's when we'll know that it's been a success.
I was going to say, I think what's interesting for me is how this affects rugby from their point of view, and it's might be more for a rugby podcast, but you've got players in the British leagues going to France for a payday. You've just seen Finn Russell leave. He's one of the bigger players in Scotland. One of the Armitage brothers played most of his career in France, despite the fact that England won't pick players playing abroad. And now you've got Christian Wade leaving, who's one of the biggest stars in the Premier League. I wonder about the effect it's going to have on rugby union. You know, it's going to be interesting to watch.
I think the knock-on effect of rugby league is interesting as more players go from league to union as well, and coaches.
Let's take a mini break to talk about fantasy football. This week, I am joined by our dynamic duo, Chris Milner and Richard King. How are you both?
I'm very good. Thank you very much. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. So let's hear what you've got for our audience this week.
Okay, so starting at quarterback, I think one great start would be Baker Mayfield for the Cleveland Browns. He's not owned in too many leagues. He's 41% on Yahoo, 38% on ESPN. And I just think he's got a pretty good matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals. They currently give up the second most points to the position, and I think that with the players that he's got in town, Baker's got a brilliant ceiling and not a bad floor either. So that's my selection at quarterback.
Yep, good pick. Divisional game as well, so obviously a chance to ball out. I'm going with another divisional rivalry. I've got Eli Manning against the Eagles. Eagles give up 6th most fantasy points against quarterbacks and 2nd most against wide receivers. So I'm hoping for Eli to keep his perfect passer streak rolling on for this week.
And then moving on, I've got Marlon Mack as my running back start. I just think that the way that Andrew Luck is playing at the moment means that the Colts they're just on fire, and Marlon Mack he's the lead back in an offense where he's going to be catching a lot of passes. So if you're in any type of league that rewards points for receptions, he's a fantastic play against Miami Dolphins.
Yep, definitely. Dolphins give up 5th most fantasy points to the position. Another good pick. I'm going with breakout guy from last week, Gus Edwards, for the Baltimore Ravens. He's playing against the Raiders, who give up the 6th most per running back. So Edwards and Mack this week for running backs.
For wide receiver, I was kind of struggling to narrow it down to one, so I'm actually going to cheat and say 2. So I've got Anthony Miller, who was, he's the second receiver in Chicago, but Anna Robinson's going to be taking the attention of Darius Slay, and recently the Detroit Lions have really struggled defending the pass. And my second one had a bit of a disappointing week last week, and I always struggle to pronounce his name, but it's Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He had a really disappointing week last week, but with Jimmy Graham out of the lineup, I think he's just got an opportunity to ball out, really. I mean, just last week, one reception for 8 yards. It's not really an indication of his talent. The guy's talented. He's in an offense where he's getting the ball from Aaron Rodgers, one of the best quarterbacks in the game. So I'd put him in there. I've actually got him in a few leagues, so I'm going to be starting him this week, even against the Vikings.
Well, I'll cheat as well, just because I agree with the Anthony Miller pick, because I also was thinking Anthony Miller. And then I saw that Mitch Trubisky is dealing with a shoulder injury, so hopefully on a short week turnaround he'll be okay on Thanksgiving against the Lions. But yeah, I think Miller's a good pick. Also, Traquan Smith against the Falcons. Kingy thought this was a bit of an obvious choice, but he's still currently not owned in more than about 66% of leagues. So if you are looking for that playoff push now and you need a decent flex and he's still available in your league, throw money at him to get him, because he's going up against the Falcons pass defense, give up the 3rd most fantasy points to the position, and obviously the even better quarterback, Drew Brees, throwing to him. Sorry, mate.
No, that's fine. I mean, to be honest, the only reason why, as I said, I think it's obvious is because if he's available, you should have already added into your team. He's the type of guy who this late in the season he could literally win your league for you.
Yep.
So yeah, absolutely great pick. Moving on to the grossness that is the tight end position. I've got the Denver Broncos tight end Jeff Hoyman. Reason being, he's in a home matchup against Pittsburgh, who they're not great at defending the position, but they're not awful.
12th, in case anyone was wondering the number.
Yeah, they're kind of mid-table, so it's 8.7 points a game, but I just think with the way that the offensive line's playing and with Thomas leaving town, you see he gets a lot of dump-offs from Case Keenum. And I think against Pittsburgh, where Case Keenum's going to be getting a lot of pass rush coming his way, he's going to be looking for that little dump-off. So, again, if you're in any type of league that rewards anything for receptions, I think he's a good add. And he's also really highly used in the red zone. His touchdowns don't actually reflect that, but he gets a lot of targets in the red zone.
Okay, well, my one to close it out is going to be Seattle tight end. Shout out to Shona. Ed Dixon got a touchdown last week. He's going up against the Panthers, who are the worst in the league against defending against tight ends. And yeah, you never know. Could be a flyer. Also, if I'm going to cheat, I might go on the back of your Mayfield pick earlier in this segment, David Njoku against the Bengals. That's my other one.
Yeah, I think they're both fantastic. Ed Dixon is one of those guys who seems like he's just sprung out of nowhere after the Seattle bye week. He just seems like he's scoring touchdowns or he's getting a lot of yards. I mean, I can't see he's going to be very, very highly owned. I mean, as I'm looking now, he's 4% on Yahoo and 3% on ESPN. So you can pick him up. I wouldn't even say you need to pick him up on waivers. I think you probably pick him up as a free agent after waivers have cleared. But yeah, in this year at tight end, unless you've got one of those big names, and by that I mean Travis Kelce or Zach Ertz pretty much exclusively, then you're looking to stream because it's kind of touchdown or bust.
Agreed.
Thanks for that, guys. I'm sure our listeners will appreciate the insight, and we'll hear more from you next week. So still with us, we have Shona, Duncan, Ryan and Nat, and I thought perhaps with this next one we could have a little fun. Without mentioning any cutlery for fear of being sued by Dan Hansis, I'm going to give each of you some teams, and I want you to tell me if you think their season is over and why. But I'm not going to make this one easy. Let's start this one with you, Shona. Seattle Seahawks.
No, it's not over. Never over. It's not over until Pete Carroll says so. I mean, if you
is that how it works?
That's how it works. On Thursday night, right, we beat the Packers 27-24 at home. And that was not only the good thing. We're now 5-5. Every result on Sunday kind of went our way. So Atlanta, Carolina, the Eagles, and Minnesota all lost. And they're all people that we're are going to be competing against for that wild card spot. If you go into it a little bit more detail, several lost to teams that we've already beat. So Dallas beat the Falcons, Detroit beat the Panthers, we beat both of them, and the Vikings have lost to the Bears. Now we did lose to the Bears, but if Bears win their division in NFC North, that means we're going to be still to play the Vikings at home. I believe it's at home. I have to double check that. That could be a game we could win, as opposed to the Bears, because obviously they would have the tiebreaker on us. The season is not over yet. We're like, a dark horse, I think, for the playoff spot. I'm sure Duncan would disagree with me, but if the Colts can be a dark horse for the wild card spot, then so can we.
And Duncan, now be careful given who's on the pod. The Green Bay Packers.
Yes, Ryan. Sorry about this.
Don't worry about it. I forgive you already. Don't worry about it.
I am going to declare their season over. Not because of anything other than I don't think their coach understands exactly what they have and how to use them. Rodgers obviously is an all-world talent. He's amazing. Some of those throws the other night against the Seattle Seahawks were just incredible. Aaron Jones looks like such a player, and you must be excited to see him for the next 5 to 10 years. You've got some real great young players on defence, not least Kenny Clark, who I'm really impressed by. You've still got Clay Matthews and some real great pieces. But somehow, somewhere, something's going wrong. And I think for all his great service for the Super Bowl that he brought them, I think he should be applauded for so long, for an incredible amount of time. But it might be time that he moved on and let someone else take the reins in a league that's really changing in coaching terms. And for that reason, given the competition in their division as well, the Vikings and the Bears, I think their season may be done.
Yeah, that seems pretty fair. I also think that the very obvious tension between Rodgers and McCarthy isn't helping. And Aaron Rodgers, while he's still making all-world, throws and plays, he actually isn't playing that well. I don't believe. The 3rd and 2 against Seattle, the rub route they have with Adams, he just has to hit that, and he's missing a lot of open throws. He is part of the problem. By no means is he the entire problem. I believe without him, we're probably a 2-win team, as in 2 wins throughout the season. The roster isn't particularly great, but I think if we lose against Minnesota, we're definitely done.
And Nat, how about the Miami Dolphins?
Oh, how about the Miami Dolphins? Oh God, I'm just, as Dolphins fans listening will sympathise with. I have succumbed to a life of mediocrity. I mean, the Dolphins are, at least when I was a kid and I stupidly chose the Dolphins as my team, they, had flashes of excitement. I had Marino, for God's sake. There was something to live for. But it's, I thought it was all going to be different with Adam Gase, and I thought, it looks so promising. But here we are again, just a 500 team again. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Looking at our schedule, I think I might actually put some money on this. I think we're going to finish 8-8, which is just unbelievable. So we've got the Bills twice, and I know with the Bills this season, who the hell knows? But let's assume we get a couple of wins there. We've got the Patriots and the Vikings. We'll probably lose those, and then I think we'll split one of the Colts and Jags. So I think we're going to finish 8-8 again, which things couldn't have got worse from the Jay Cutler era that we all remember so fondly. Brock Osweiler, of course, is our chief protagonist of recent weeks, which is just, going from the sublime to the ridiculous. I don't know. I wasn't totally sold on Adam Gase, and that's easy to say that at the moment because things aren't exactly working out. And I sympathise with him because I just don't think we've got a particularly talented roster. But I quite like the fact he's pretty demonstrative and no nonsense and kind of cleans house. He's done that with a number of players. But I wonder whether when you're a head coach and you do that and then things don't change dramatically, whether you really weaken your hand. And I'm worried that's maybe what has happened there. But I think you answer your question, I think you can almost count on the fact that we won't make the playoffs again. And if we do, we're going to squeak in the 6th seed and just be humiliated in the wildcard round. So I also hope we don't make it. But I'll still love him.
Now, as a fellow West Ham fan, in terms of sporting mediocrity, I feel your pain.
Oh man, I tell you what. Well, firstly, come on you irons, and secondly, I have inflicted actually the one saving grace which changed in recent years. But can you imagine? So my baseball team is the Cubs. So can you imagine up to a couple of years ago, talk about the unholy trifecta of teams to pick. Yeah. But at least the Cubs have won something now. So there's, at least I've seen a win. But it's amazing how similar West Ham and Miami are. It really is.
And Ryan, how about the 5-5 Bengals?
Yeah. They're sort of. They are where I expected them to be, 500 at this stage. Their schedule's actually quite interesting because it's not too difficult. They play the Browns next, then the Broncos, but they also finish up with 2 away games at the Browns and at the Steelers. Conversely, they are also the Ravens in their division, who I think currently have the 6th seed. Yes, and Cincinnati have got the 7th seed, if you will. The Ravens have got some brutal road games left. They go to Atlanta in week 13. They then go to KC the week after, and then week 16 they go to the Chargers. That is not good for the Ravens. So that as long as Cincinnati can win when the Ravens drop a game, then I think they'll get in. The other interesting one for me is the Texans, because I don't really think they're playing that well, and they currently hold the division lead and subsequently the 4th seed. But the Colts I honestly think the Colts could win out and go 11-5. If that's the case, then they'll take that division, I believe. And then you're looking at what the Texans' record is for the wild card. They're currently 7-3, but not really playing well, but winning. Andy Dalton kind of is what I expect him to be. 20 TDs, 10 picks. They're an okay team. If they are going to get in the wild card spot, I think they're going to have to go to Pittsburgh and beat Pittsburgh, because I really do think that final wild card spot will come down to week 17.
I totally agree with you on the Texans. So you look at this streak that everyone's talking about. Look at the teams they've beaten, and I know you can only beat who's put in front of you, but the teams they've beaten, the form those teams were in when the Texans played them, and how close a number of those games were. Right, so they played the Cowboys. They won that in overtime. The Bills, the Jags, who had been, with a few exceptions, hopeless this season. The Dolphins, I think we've covered them. The Broncos, they sneaked by 2 points, and the Redskins and Alex Smith went down and Colt McCoy came in. So you've really got to take that run with a massive dose of salt, I think. And I agree completely with you. I think the Texans are wildly overrated. And the Colts, Paolo Bandini on our pod, much to our amusement at the start of the season, picked the Colts for the playoffs, and we all took this is a family show, so we all took the mickey out of him, and now he's having the last laugh, I think. And we were looking at exactly the same point you just made, that their running is quite favourable, and the Titans are unbelievably deceptive in terms of are they good or not. I'm not really sure. I think the Colts are a decent bet for that division.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think then that obviously puts the Texans in trouble and the Titans in trouble as well. So it's Cincinnati have got an okay running, but they just have to make sure that that they basically win the games that you believe they should win, which I believe are the Browns, Broncos, Raiders, and Browns again. The Chargers at the Chargers and at the Steelers, you've got to split those ideally, I think. But again, it's just so tight.
I feel a bit sorry for the Titans on Sunday. I know they are one of those teams that are you don't know if they're actually good or not, but their DC went out in the first quarter. DMP.
Yeah, sure.
I know he's all right now, but that would have a massive effect on you, I think, in a game.
Yeah, it reminded me when it was, I cannot remember. I think Gary Kubiak when he was at Houston.
Houston, that's right.
Yeah, weirdly, I remember watching you and Mike Carlson on Channel 4 at the time. That was a very odd game because the atmosphere was just completely sucked from that team. You could see that their mind rightly just wasn't on the task at hand.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Shona, actually. And I suppose I wasn't necessarily relating just kind of recency bias to this weekend just gone, but I think I can't work out their offense essentially. And not only did Dean Pease go down, but obviously when you got Blaine Gabbert in there, not much is going to happen. So I think defensively and unsurprisingly under Vrabel, they're solid, but I just don't know how good they are offensively. Whereas I think the Daltons, particularly when AJ Green is fit, obviously, and he hasn't been recently, they've got a sucker punch in them. And I think, but this is what we love about the game there. And all of these teams, you could argue for and against quite credibly whether they'll make it or not.
Let's look at the defending champions, Philadelphia Eagles. What do you all think to that one?
I think their season's over, and I'll tell you why. You have just played an absolutely catastrophic game where you are the first champions out of 98 to be beaten that badly in a regular season. And you kind of have to point at Doug Peterson for that. You have to. They were unstoppable a year ago. The Eagles won 16 out of 18 games that they won. It's 4-6, and they've lost 5 of their last 7 games. I kind of confused as to where it's all gone wrong in such a quick space of time. Doug got the credit last year, and rightly so. That was a dream season. You even had Nick Foles come in and win you the Super Bowl when Wentz went down, but it's just not working, and I don't see how they're going to be able to turn it around. It's just, to me, it's just not clicking on offense or defense. It's just not working.
Yeah, I agree. There was a play against the Saints that was really, really odd. They'd just gone 10 zip down, and the first play of 1st and 10 is a play action pass, and Wentz just hauls it into double coverage, and it's picked. the last thing you want to do against the New Orleans Saints is give them free possessions, and it was just a head scratcher.
I think it's all going to come down to how the players react to that game. Are they going to get mad and do something about it? Or will they just, is their season over? Where's their head at? It's they've just seen Alex Smith go down for the Redskins. We've spoken about how the Cowboys now have the opportunity. If the Eagles can get it together, it's open to them. But, I mean, let's remember they were known as the underdogs last playoffs for a reason, weren't they? So maybe that was right in some respects.
Can you see, though, do you look at that Eagles roster and go, yeah, those guys are going to get mad and they're going to fight back? I don't see it.
There's a really interesting thing about the Eagles that I think it was OC made the point when we were doing the game earlier in the season, the Wembley game earlier in the season, that people are talking about how they're fading, particularly on the front seven, and what's different. I mean, offensively, there are obvious differences with the coaching changes in particular, right? But the run game, should they have sorted that out when J.J. went down? But people pointing to the defense in the front seven and saying they're not the same as last year. And Oshie was saying, well, because you look at how banged up they are, so players have to just spell for longer, right? They just got to be out there for longer. And again, when you combine that with the offense not as effective as it was last season, and you put two and two together, and that's kind of why. And I think that's been overlooked quite a lot, that the injuries and the absences on with the front seven, which was a really strong unit in terms of strength in depth. And sometimes you look at the starters and forget about the players that are coming in and just mixing it up to give the starters a breather. And when the starters have to play for that sustained period of time, it's a pretty tough game. It's not a surprise that they will start to tail off in the fourth quarter. So I think that has a lot to do with it. And the point about coaches, and Carlson was making this point on the pod the other day, any team that does well is always going to start to get plundered the next season or for the next season, for their coaching staff. And Reich and De Filippo, but particularly Reich, is a massive loss for them. And I think seeing that, I think it's understandable why they're not nowhere near as good as they were last year.
And also the secondary last year was probably the one weak spot, and it's already thinner than it was the whole of last year. They're losing guys left, right, and centre in the back end there. So that's also hampering them massively. Yeah,
exactly. That's a good point.
Long term, also, you've got to wonder if not now, when, because that Wentz contract's coming up fast.
Do we see a coaching change as well on Black Monday? Like, if it keeps going the way it does? Because
no. Sorry.
But he won a Super Bowl a year ago, and this year you could now be on the brink of history again by becoming one of the worst Super Bowl teams ever a year later.
I think you have to give him one more year, because I think the Super Bowl, rightly or wrongly, a Super Bowl nearly always buys a coach a sort of, I wouldn't say a free season, but if they have a bad season, what with the Super Bowl hangover stuff, free agency, and like Nat said with the coaching changes and that, the disruption is almost inevitable. And I think it kind of buys a Super Bowl winning coach some time, which I think it will do with Peterson.
Now, Nat, we couldn't possibly have you on the podcast without quizzing you some more. Duncan, I'll let you go first.
Sure. I was interested to know what play or plays from the time you discovered the NFL really stick in your mind from history.
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I'll tell you what, my earliest memory, kind of coherent memory, is the I can't remember which Super Bowl it was, the 49ers Super Bowl, where Montana says, look, John Candy, it's the Bengals Super Bowl, and they beat the Bengals, and he drives down and they beat the Bengals, whatever that one was. And just I remember I was at that stage wasn't allowed to stay up for the game, so I had to kind of discover the Super Bowl result in the morning or often. I mean, when I was a kid, I subscribed to First Down newspaper, which I always remind Carlson of, and was reading that when other kids are reading Match and Shoot in the playground, and that was pre-internet, the real source of info, the only source of info really. But that was my earliest Super Bowl memory, and just not so much a play but a moment. One of the things that sticks in my head is a celebration, or two celebrations, the Joe Horn phone celebration, which is brilliant to see Michael Thomas replicate this season. I absolutely loved that as well. and a nod to that. And then Ocho Cinco in my first season, or Chad Johnson as he was known then, the first season of doing NFL on Channel 5, his Hall of Fame celebration after his touchdown, those where he ran to the sidelines and they had this makeshift Hall of Fame jacket, which was extraordinary. So moments like that kind of stand out. Plays got so many to mention. I mean, the Saints onside kick in the Super Bowl is probably for me the most startling play. You know, just watching it and thinking, what the hell did I just see? You know, got a great question, man. Lots and lots. But those are kind of a few different memories that kind of stick out for different reasons. So I was lucky enough, actually, just on that, I was lucky enough to interview Montana. And it was quite jammy because it was at a tailgate, was the first interview that I was hosting that out, you know, the kind of outdoors tailgate at Wembley. And then he was a guest on when I was doing Channel 4 coverage. And it's, you know, you guys have interviewed players and coaches. And if you're lucky enough to meet them a couple of times in quite quick succession, the second interview is always much looser. And, you know, because I worked with him and he was on stage and we recreated the catch. I mean, God, there's another incredible play, right? So we recreated the catch. And then I mentioned, and I told him pretty much what I just told you guys about, God, I remember as a kid and I fell in love with this strange game. And I just remember this clip of you pointing like in the most high pressured situation possible. Like, oh, look, there's John Candy. And we kind of laughed about it. So then I thought, okay, I could probably go there. And on TV, on the interview, I asked him his favorite John Candy film and suggested Uncle Buck, which I think might be mine. And he went Planes, Trains and Automobiles. So,
nice.
Uncle
Buck is my favorite.
Oh, I'm with you on that. I love Uncle Buck.
So good.
Love Uncle Buck. Love John Candy. The other thing, actually, the play that occurred to me from, I guess, more recently is the Minnesota Miracle from last season, because I came home having done an earlier game on radio and turned it on and watched the kind of final stage of the game. And one of my kids woke up had a bad dream or whatever and came downstairs, and I said, oh, come and sit with Daddy and we'll watch this for a bit. And that was the first 5 to 10 minutes of football that they consciously watched, and so they think that every game is like that now. And we have to bring it back down to earth a little bit. Being a Dolphins fan, that's not going to be hard, to be honest. But yeah, that has to be in there as well. That was incredible.
So how did your career progress from stand-up comedy to presenting NFL on Channel 5 with Mike Carlson?
Yeah, well, I did start out as a stand-up. That's right, and it's a kind of interesting. It's really helped me, I think, because I did it for 4 or 5 years, and I'm always kind of a little bit reluctant to say, hey, I was a comedian, because I guess the best example or comparison I can give is it's like I played at the college level, right? And I guess to a reasonable degree at the college level. Like I did stand up for 4 or 5 years. I got signed by an agent. I was doing 20-minute sets professionally, doing TV appearances. So, I did okay with it. But, real comedians have a body of work much longer than that. They're doing longer sets. And, I was part of a crew like that people like Greg Davis and Rod Gilbert and Simon Amstel and that generation. We were all sort of coming through at the same time, all great comics. And without being self-deprecating, I realized I could hold my own, and but I loved it. But I realized it's not what I wanted to do. And presenting was what I wanted to do, and sports in particular. And it was a lucky break, really. I kind of stood back from stand up, and it gave me a lot of grounding doing live stuff. I mean, when you're starting in an open mic environment, my first gig was at Brunel University on a Saturday night in front of the student union. You learn to think on your feet quite quickly, and so in some respects, I was prepared for doing live stuff, but nothing prepares you for doing live telly. I got a screen test, and it was a dream, because it's a game I've loved since I was a kid. So that really helped. I think that what I was lacking in technique at the time, I made up for in passion for the game, and I think that counted for a lot. And I was, they took a chance on me, and I got the gig. And those late night years were brilliant. And the first year was a real baptism of fire, and I was pretty rubbish, and I was learning as I was going along. But the one thing I guess that really helped as well was connecting with Mike in that kind of odd couple way that we do, and that's only got stronger and stronger. And we're really outside of the stuff on screen, we're good friends, and we're completely different people in so many ways, but then we share a lot of the same interests, and not just football, but Mike is such a brilliant mind on virtually anything. But you talk to him about literature or film, politics. He's just such an interesting guy. So it was great, and I've been really lucky to have worked with people like him and all the guys behind the scenes as well that go into making this stuff. It's just, I've been blessed that it's just such a good crew all along the way. And sometimes you have to pinch yourself and think, I'm getting paid to cover football, but it's it's been great. But that was the transition. So kind of getting a break, being in the right time, the right pace, but grafting to once to get there in the first place, I guess. But once I got there, to make sure that I didn't take it lightly.
I think I speak for everyone. I say we miss the show, and especially Mike's shirts.
Oh God, yeah, they don't translate as well on radio, do they? And he has to behave himself when he's doing the BBC games. Oh no, it was a great time, and we talked to a lot of people who I think found the game through that show, and it's from a broadcasting point of view. I mean, it would be overstating it to say it was unique, but it was quite unusual in that we could, because we're on late night and there was this cult thing, and in the sense that we were all part, the cult being us and all the fans of the NFL, right? Not so much the show. Yeah. As this game that was kind of our game, right? But at the same time we could, because it was 2 a.m, come back and say, out of every series of The Wire, which was your favorite theme tune? Just talk about that for 3 minutes, and we get away with that as well, and it just all seemed to make sense. Whereas if you think about that, not many shows give you that kind of license. So it was great, and it was a good run for sure. But it's just good that we're involved in lots of other things and different formats, and it just keeps on rolling.
Absolutely. And before we let you go, Nat, perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about what's coming up next for you. Obviously, you've got your own podcast, the NFL Show, which is, by the way, a favourite of mine. And I suppose, will you be heading to Atlanta for the Super Bowl? Yeah,
we certainly will. We're going to be out there a week, I think, which is exciting. So, yeah, the pod, we launched this season, and, I still do the live coverage with TalkSport, and we were doing a weekly radio show on TalkSport on top of that for the last couple of years, and we decided to kind of take it out and make it as an indie, which is what I'm doing with a gang of guys, some of whom have worked on NFL before. Andrew Willis, who produced Jason Onosi and Chappers on their highlight show for a few years, and Pete Thomas, who's produced us back in the day on Channel 4. So it's a really good crew there, and so we got we're learning more and more about the podcast world, as I'm sure you guys are, and doing all kinds of stuff with it. But it's going fairly well, and we're going to be out in Atlanta all week making shows, and we're doing video content, and then I'll be doing the game live for radio. So yeah, can't wait for that. And while I'm always disappointed that we're getting to week 12 and starting to get quite melancholic about that, there's always the Super Bowl to look forward to.
Absolutely.
I can't say I'm not jealous.
I was going to say, what a stadium as well, though.
Yeah, right. The last one, the Minnesota Stadium, was incredible. The acoustics, everyone had told me about this, and we got there relatively early to set up, because I was doing that game for radio as well, and so we were on air relatively early and had to set everything up and everything else. So we were maybe about 10% full, with fans coming in as well. And even when it was only 10% full, the sound was, oh my God. And when it was rammed and you had Philly fans who were just hardcore, it was incredible. I mean, the acoustics are amazing. At these new stadiums, the acoustics are just, something else.
Excellent stuff. Well, that's all for this week's show. Huge thanks, Nat, for playing along, and of course to Christian Scotland-Williamson for taking time out of his schedule to chat to us. As always, please do share your thoughts with us on Twitter. We'd love to know the team's season you believe is over and why. You can tweet us at 99yards. And don't forget to join us next week, where we'll be interviewing Indianapolis Colts safety Corey Moore. Thanks for listening.